I didn't make a scene. That's the part they never expected, and the part I'm proudest of. It was June of 2017, the night of my college graduation dinner. My parents had booked the back room of an Italian place in Worthington, the kind with white tablecloths they only used for special occasions, which in our flight, my brother, there were maybe 40 people there. Aunts, uncles, neighbors, my father's golf buddies. I was 22 and I had just graduated from Ohio State with a degree in design, and for about an hour I let myself believe the dinner was for me. Then my father stood up and tapped his glass with a fork. He thanked everyone for coming. He said it was a big night for the family. And then he started talking about my brother, who had just signed with a top accounting firm out of Wharton, who was going to be a CPA, who was, in my father's words, the one who's going to make this family name mean something. Everyone clapped. My brother sat there, looking like he wanted to slide under the table. Because even at 25 he knew when the floor was tilting the wrong way. My father turned to me last. He raised his glass an inch in my direction and said, "And Camille graduated too. We're proud of her, she'll figure something out." A couple of people chuckled, the polite kind of laugh you give when you're not sure if it's a joke. My mother smiled and nodded like he'd said something gracious. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I sat very still and I looked around that room and I memorized it. The lipstick print on my aunt's wine glass. The way the candle flame leaned toward the AC vent, the exact pitch of that laughter. People think I disappeared from this family because they finally broke me that night. The truth is the opposite. That was the night I stopped trying to win. I understood, sitting in that chair with marinara going cold on my plate, that you cannot win a game where the other person gets to move the goalposts whenever you get close. So I quit. Quietly. Completely. 7 years later, my parents sent my brother to find me, and what he found out turned their whole world upside down. But by then there was nothing left for them to do about it. Let me back up, because the dinner wasn't the start. It was just the loudest part. I grew up the second kid, 3 years behind my brother, in a beige house on a cul-de-sac in suburban Ohio. Nice enough. 2-car garage, a father who sold commercial insurance, and a mother who taught second grade, and a town where your worth was measured by whether your kid got into a real school or a backup schools. My brother was the real school. I was apparently always the backup. I figured this out early. I was 9 years old the first time it became undeniable. I'd entered a poster contest at school, a thing about recycling, and I'd spent 2 weeks on it, cutting little paper fish out of magazine pages to show what trash does to a river. I won second place. A red ribbon. I brought it home so excited, I forgot to take my shoes off at the door, which was a crime in our house. My father glanced at it for about a second and said, "That's nice, kiddo." Then he turned to my brother and asked him to tell my mother about the math league letter. My brother had made the regional team. My mother actually put her hand over her mouth. My father got up and squeezed my brother's shoulders and said, "We always knew," and then, almost as an afterthought, he told me to go wash up for dinner. The next morning I found my poster in the recycling bin in the garage. The red ribbon was still stapled to the corner. I want you to understand it wasn't even crumpled. It was just placed there neatly, like it belonged with the other paper we didn't need anymore. I stood in that cold garage, and I learned the lesson that shaped the next 13 years of my life. Effort doesn't count if you're the wrong kid. Only the right kids' wins were real. It kept going like that. When my brother turned 16, my parents bought him a used Jetta and threw a little driveway party, and my father gave a speech about how my brother had earned it with his grades. When I turned 16, I asked about a car, and my mother told me, gently, like she was teaching me something, that I'd appreciate things more if I worked for them. I got a part-time job at a frozen yogurt place and bought a 15-year-old Corolla with 140,000 miles on it. My father never once offered to look under the hood. He'd spent every Saturday teaching my brother how to change his own oil. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because it explains why, the night of that graduation dinner, I didn't. I felt clear. I left the restaurant at 9. Nobody noticed. My brother texted me 20 minutes later, "Cam, I'm sorry, that was messed up, call me, and I didn't answer. I drove back to my apartment, the one I shared with a roommate who was already mostly moved out, and I sat on my bed and I opened my laptop. I made a new email address that night. Something clean, with none of my real name in it. Then I started searching. How to start a brand without showing your face. How to sell online. How to register a business in a state that isn't the one you grew up in. I had about $21,000, saved from 4 years of frozen yogurt and serving tables and a graphic design internship that actually paid. I opened a spreadsheet, and I tracked every dollar rent if I moved, a website, supplies, shipping. I figured out how long I could survive if I just left. 4 months, maybe 5 if I was careful. My brother texted again at 11. Please talk to me. I turned my phone over, so I couldn't see the screen. I didn't cry that night either. I made a plan, because a plan was the only thing in my life that had ever actually obeyed me. 3 weeks later, I packed 2 suitcases and a box of design supplies into the Corolla, and I drove south. Not because I had a destination, exactly, but because I'd visited Asheville once on a school trip and remembered thinking the whole city smelled like coffee and rain. My mother texted me who my brother loved. Where are you going to live now that the lease is up? I typed back, one word. South. Then nothing for 2 weeks. And finally, okay. Let us know if you need anything. They didn't ask which city. They didn't ask for an address. They didn't call. I found a studio above a print shop on the west side of Asheville for $740 a month. The hot water took 10 minutes to show up and the floor sloped toward one corner, so bad a marble would roll across it on its own. I didn't care. It was mine, and nobody in it had ever thrown my work in the trash. I slept on an air mattress the first month. I set up a folding table by the window, and I started designing. Stationery first, then little linen sachets, then candles as I poured myself in a thrift store crockpot until I learned to do it right. I called the brand Halden after my grandmother. Halden was her maiden name, and she was the only person in my family who ever looked at something I made and said it was good and meant it. She died when I was 19. Using her name felt like keeping a door open to the one person who'd been on my side. I never put my face on anything. The website said the founder was C. Halden and nothing more. No photos, no interviews. When buyers wanted a call, I kept the camera off and said I was private about it, and most of them respected that because the work spoke. I wasn't hiding from shame. I was hiding because anonymity was the only armor I'd ever found that actually worked. My family couldn't take credit for what they couldn't see, and they couldn't tear down what they didn't know existed. The first year I made about $34,000 in sales and kept almost none of it. Year 2, I cracked 96. I worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week. I ate a lot of rice and frozen vegetables. My social life was a library card and a Tuesday night farmer's market where I sold candles out of a wagon. I was tired all the time and I was, for the first time in my life, completely free, and I would not have traded one for the other. Then came March of 2018. And the phone call that I spent the next 7 years building a case around. It was a Thursday night, almost 10, and my phone rang with an Ohio area code I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up. But something made me. It was my father, and his voice was wrecked. Camille, thank God.
Thank God you answered.
I could hear my mother crying somewhere behind him. My stomach dropped before he even said why. He told me my brother had been in a car accident. A bad one, on I-71, somebody ran a light. He said my brother needed emergency surgery. Internal bleeding, something with his spleen, and that the hospital wanted a deposit because there was a coverage problem, some pre-authorization mess with the insurance, and they needed money tonight or first thing in the morning. He said the number was $19,400. I want to be honest about this part, because people online have torn into this story since, asking how anyone could be that stupid. I wasn't that stupid. I tried to verify it. I told my father I needed to talk to my brother, and he said my brother was already being prepped, unconscious, that I couldn't talk to him. I asked which hospital, and he gave me a name. I actually hung up and called my brother's cell, and it rang and went to voicemail, which, in the moment, only made it worse, because a person who can't pick up is a person on an operating table. I called the hospital he'd named and got a switchboard and a hold queue. And while I was on hold, my mother called me, sobbing so hard she couldn't get over and over. Just saying my brother's name over and over on. And I loved my brother. He was the only one in that family who'd ever sent me an I'm sorry text. When my father got back on the line and his voice cracked and he said, "Camille, this is your brother's life. What kind of sister are you?" I stopped checking. I closed my eyes and I said okay. I'd wire it in the morning. I sent $19,400 at 9 a.m. the next day from a credit union branch on Patton Avenue, my hands shaking so bad the teller asked if I was all right. That was nearly everything I had. It was 5 months of rent. It was my entire cushion, the buffer between me and sleeping in my car. I had about $1,600 left. 3 days later I texted my father. How is he? The message went green. I called. Straight to voicemail. I called my mother. Voicemail. I called the cell 5 more times over 2 days. Then I understood what had actually happened. They had blocked me, every one of them. They'd taken the money and erased me like I was an app they'd deleted off a phone. Like the only thing I'd ever been to them was a balance they could draw down. I sat on the sloped floors of that studio for a long time. And then I did something that I think saved me. Although it didn't feel like it then, I opened my laptop and made a folder and named it, with no small amount of spite, receipts. I saved the wire confirmation. I screenshotted every green message. I saved my own call log with the timestamps. I didn't have proof yet that they'd lied. I still half believed my brother was hurt, and they were just too overwhelmed to text me back. But some animal part of me knew to keep everything. So I did. I want to compress the next 7 years, because the day-to-day doesn't matter as much as the shape of it. I changed my phone number that April and didn't give it to anyone in Ohio. I tried my brother's email once, that summer, just to ask if he was okay, and it bounced. He'd changed jobs and the address was dead. I took that as confirmation that he was in on it, and I stopped reaching out to anyone. I poured everything into the brand. I moved to a smaller place, $620 a month, to keep my burn rate down. I reinvested every spare dollar into better wax, better photography, a real website, then my first wholesale accounts. Year 3, I did $410,000 in sales and registered the company properly as Halden Home Co. in North Carolina. Year 4, the world locked down, and everybody who was suddenly stuck inside their houses decided they wanted those houses to feel like something. And a candle and linen brand, with a calm, quiet aesthetic, turned out to be exactly what a frightened country wanted to buy. I did $1.3 million that year. I hired my first employee, a fulfillment lead in Greenville, then a designer, then an operations manager. By 2023, I had 11 people on payroll and a real warehouse and accounts in 300 independent shops. I bought a little 1940s bungalow in West Asheville with money I'd made myself, planted herbs in the window, and slept, for the first time in my adult life, without a knot in my chest. I still kept my face off everything. See, Halden was a name with a reputation now, written up in trade magazines, quoted in retail newsletters, and not one of those articles had a photo. My family knew a girl named Camille, who'd failed to make anything of herself. They had never heard of C. Halden. That was exactly how I wanted it. I wasn't hiding anymore, I told myself. I was building. There's a difference, and the difference is which direction your hands are facing. Then, in the late summer of 2025, 2 things happened in the same month, and they collided in a way I could not have planned if I'd tried for a decade. The first was that a larger company came for me. A consumer brands group called Brightleaf Collective wanted to buy a majority stake in Halden Home Co. My business attorney, a sharp, unhurried woman named Tara Briggs, whom I'd hired 2 years earlier, called me on a Tuesday and said, "They're offering $8.1 million for 60%. 5.4 cash up front, the rest as an earnout over 2 years. You keep 40% and stay on as creative director, 3-year contract, salary $165. I had to sit down on my own kitchen floor, the same way I'd sat on a floor 7 years before, except this time Sassen were steady. The deal required due diligence. Financial due diligence. A deep audit of my books, my contracts, my whole corporate structure. handled by an outside advisory firm that Brightleaf used. That firm had an office in Charlotte. And a forensic accountant at that firm, a mid-level guy who'd been there 3 years grinding toward partner, got handed the Halden home file on a Wednesday morning and was told to verify the incorporation documents and trace the ownership. That accountant was my brother. I didn't know it yet. He didn't know it yet. He opened the file and started where any forensic accountant starts, with the corporate records, and the registered agent's address jumped out at him, a street in Asheville. He flipped to the founder of record. C. Halden. He didn't think anything of it for about 10 minutes. Then he pulled the original articles of organization, and there, in the historical filings, before I'd cleaned up the structure, was a name on an old document. Camille Halden. He sat very still in his cubicle, he told me later, because Halden was our grandmother's name, and there was only one person on earth who would have used it. He called me that Friday evening. I didn't recognize the number and almost let it go, but I answered, his voice, older. Careful, it's me. I didn't say anything. I hadn't heard him in 7 years. I'm working on the Brightleaf deal. The audit. Cam, you're C. Halden. You built this. You built an $8 million company, and nobody back home has any idea. I still didn't say anything, because 100 things were happening in my chest at once. Why didn't you ever tell me? He asked. And I found my voice, and it was colder than I expected. The last time I trusted this family with money, I said, I wired it $19,000 for a surgery you supposedly had after a car accident you were supposedly in. Then you all blocked me for 7 years. So forgive me if I didn't send out a newsletter. The silence on the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed completely. Camille, he said slowly, I was never in a car accident. I have never had surgery in my life. In March of 2018, I was in Chicago as I'd just started the new job. I was there for a 6-week training rotation. I have the badge swipes. I have the hotel folio. I have a photo of myself at a Cubs game on the exact week you're talking about. He stopped. I could hear him breathing. What did they tell you? So I told him. The phone call. The spleen. The deposit. The $19,400. The green messages. The blocking. As he talked, I could hear through something him coming apart, and for the first time occurred to me that maybe he hadn't known. That maybe all these years our parents had told him a different story, that I'd vanished after graduation because I was unstable, that I'd cut everyone off, that I was the one who left. They told us you stopped answering, he said. His voice was shaking now. After your graduation. They said you blamed everyone and disappeared and wouldn't take our calls. Mom cried about it at Thanksgiving for years. They blocked me, I said. 3 days after I sent the money. I tried to call all of you a dozen times. The money came out of my account and then I didn't exist. Oh my God, he said, and then, very quietly, I need to see proof. Not because I don't believe you. I do. I think I've always known something was wrong. But I need to see it, Cam. I need to understand what they did. I opened the folder I'd named Receipts, out of spite 7 years earlier, and I screen shared it with my own brother on a Friday night. The wire confirmation, dated March 9, 2018, $19,400 to an account in my father's name. The screenshots of the Grease messages. My call log. He went quiet looking at it, then he sent me something back. A scan of his own badge access report from his first employer, the date stamped right there, and a hotel receipt from a Hampton Inn in Chicago covering the exact week he was supposedly bleeding out on I-71. They used me, he said. They told you I was dying so you'd empty your savings, and I didn't even know. Yeah, I said. I'm going to call them, he said. Right now, I'm going to. No, I said. Not yet. If you confront them now, they'll have a story by morning. They always have a story. We wait. We get everything first. He didn't just wait. He did what forensic accountants do. Over the next 3 weeks, on his own time, he dug. He pulled the county property records back home and found that our parents had refinanced the house twice in the last 6 years, cashing out equity each time until they owed more on it than it was worth. He found a dissolved LLC, a sandwich franchise our father had bought into and run into the ground in 2019. The year after they took my money, he found liens. He found By piecing together accounts only a CPA would recognize, the shape of something uglier. Years of losses on a sports betting esme and a string of payday loans with interest rates that should be illegal. Our parents weren't unlucky. They were drowning, and they had been drowning the night they called me, and the $19,400 had been a life raft they were perfectly willing to let me sink to grab. Cam. He texted me, one night. They're more than $100,000 underwater. The sandwich thing. The reefus, the gambling. They're past it, there's no fixing it. And then, a minute later, I'm so sorry, I should have known. I should have looked years ago. That's not your job. I texted back. But I knew it wasn't over. Drowning people don't let go of a raft just because you tell them to. They climb on top of you. It started in early October. One of my warehouse employees got a strange call from a man claiming to be a reporter doing a profile on Halden Home Co., asking pointed questions about the founder, where she lived, whether she had family. My employee thought it was off and mentioned it to me. I knew exactly what it was. My parents had found out about the company. God knows how. Maybe the same trade articles. Maybe my brother had let something slip to relatives, and they'd hired somebody cheap off the internet to confirm I had money. A $200 skip tracer, the kind that just buys data and makes a few sloppy phone calls. They couldn't afford a real investigator. They put it on a card they couldn't pay. A week later, my mother left me a voicemail. I hadn't heard her voice in 7 years. It wasn't tearful this time. It was flat, almost businesslike. She said they knew about my company. She said I'd been sitting on millions while my own parents struggled. She said I owed them. That they'd raised me, fed me, given me everything, and that I would do the right thing, or else every person I worked with would find out exactly what kind of cold, selfish daughter I really was. She gave me a week. The next day an email came from my father. The subject line was family responsibility. He wrote very formally, like he'd looked something up, that as their child I had a moral and legal obligation to support my aging parents, that they were requesting $90,000 to settle their debts, and that if I refused they would pursue all available remedies, including a filial support action. Ohio, he discovered, has an old law on the books about adult children supporting indigent parents, and a complaint to Adult Protective Services that I had abandoned them. I read it twice. Then I forwarded both the voicemail and the email to my brother, and to Tara Briggs, and I called Tara. They just threatened me, I said. In writing. They did, she said. She was quiet for a second, reading. Camille, this is textbook extortion. The voicemail alone. The fake medical emergency in 2018 is wire fraud, plain and simple. The filial law they're waving around requires a parent to be genuinely indigent, and the child to have the ability. And even then it's almost never enforced against an estranged adult who's had zero contact at the parent's own choosing. And the APS complaint is going to collapse the moment a caseworker looks at it. Because you didn't abandon anyone, they cut you off. She paused. Send me the whole folder. I drove to her office in downtown Asheville with a laptop and a backup drive. And she spent 2 hours going through 7 years of my spite folder, the wire receipt, my father's voicemail, the blocked messages, my brother's badge records, and the Chicago hotel folio proving there was never any accident. The skip tracer's calls to my employee, my mother's new voicemail, my father's $90,000 email with the threats laid right out in his own words. A timeline I'd been quietly updating for years, every date, every dollar. Tara leaned back when she was done. This is as clean as I've ever seen, she said. You kept everything. People never keep everything. She looked at me. What do you want? Because I can bury them. I thought about it. I thought about the recycling bin, and the red ribbon, and the cold marinara. I don't want to destroy them, I said. I just want them gone. I want them to never be able to reach me, or my company, or my brother again. Then we make the choice very simple for them, she said. Silence, or consequences. Tara spent a week drafting it. On a Tuesday evening in November, she sent a certified letter, 40-some pages, to my parents, and a copy to the lawyer their letter had threatened me with. It laid out the 2018 fraud. It laid out the 7 years of no contact at their instigation. It laid out the extortion attempt in their own words and voices. It included the evidence as exhibits, including my brother's records and sworn statement, and it ended with one sentence that said any further contact with me, my company, my employees, or my brother would result in criminal extortion charges and a civil suit for damages exceeding $500,000, and that they had 72 hours to confirm and that they would cease all contact forever. For 3 days, nothing. I almost let myself believe it was over. Then my father called me. The first call in 7 years, I stared at his name on the screen for 4 rings before I answered. Camille. His voice was shaking. Please, we just want to talk, as a family. It's not what it looks like. You told me my brother was dying, I said. You took $19,000 and you blocked me. Then last month you tried to extort 90 more. There's no version of that you can talk your way out of. Can we just sit down, in person? He said, please. I almost said no. But there was a part of me, the 9-year-old in the cold garage, that wanted them to look at me while I said it. Fine, I told him. There's a dine on High Street in Worthington. Saturday, 10 o'clock, my brother will be there, and I'm recording everything. Take it or leave it. There was a long silence. Okay, he said. I flew to Columbus on Friday. My brother picked me up at the airport, and we barely spoke on the drive, both of us too keyed up. Saturday morning, we got to the diner at 9:50 and took a corner booth and put 2 phones on the table, both recording, the little red dots facing up. Our parents came in at 10:15, late. The way they were always late, like the rest of the world ran on their schedule. My mother's eyes were red. My father's hands were unsteady. They slid into the booth across from us. My mother reached for my hand. Camille, sweetheart, we've been so worried. Stop, I said, and I pulled my hand back. I set my phone in the middle of the table where they could see the red light. I'm going to say this once. In March of 2018, you called me and told me my brother had been in a car wreck and needed surgery. You told me to send $19,400. I tried to verify it. You told me he was unconscious and gave me a fake hospital. I sent the money. 3 days later, you blocked me. He was never in an accident. He was in Chicago. You used your own son's life as a lie to rob Yoder, and last month you tried to do it again. My father's face went from red to gray. My mother grabbed the printed copy of Tara's letter off the table and started flipping through it faster and faster. We borrowed it, my father said. Families borrow. That's not stealing. You don't borrow money by faking a child's death, my brother said. It was the first thing he'd said. His voice was quiet and absolutely level. I saw the wire. I saw my own badge records, the ones that prove I was 300 miles away. You looked me in the eye at Thanksgiving for 7 years and let me believe my sister abandoned us. You let me grieve her. You did that on purpose. You're taking her side? My father said, turning on him. After everything I'm not taking a side, my brother said. I'm refusing to keep cleaning up your mess. My mother started to cry, and these were real tears, the kind I'd waited my whole life to see her cry over me and never did. You're going to ruin your own parents, she said, over money. I looked at my father, and I said the thing I'd driven half my life toward. You ruined this family in 2017, when you raised a glass at my graduation and toasted him. You ruined it in 2018 when you stole from me. You ruined it last month, when you threatened me. I'm not doing any of this to you. You did it. I'm just making sure you can never do it to anyone else. I stood up. My brother stood with me. You have the letter, I said. You have 72 hours to confirm in writing that you'll never contact either of us again. If you don't, my attorney files Tuesday morning. I picked up my phone. Let's go. They didn't follow us out. My brother drove. Neither of us said anything for 10 minutes, and then he reached over and gripped my hand once. Hard, the way you grab someone's hand when you've both just survived something. That was the hardest thing I've ever done, he said. Me too, I said. Their lawyer emailed Tara 2 days later. The parents agreed to cease all contact, withdrew every claim, asked only for privacy. They caved completely. Tara forwarded it with one line at the bottom. It's done. I read it 3 times, and then I closed my laptop and cried. And they weren't the kind of tears I'd cried before. They were the kind you cry when you finally set down something you've been carrying so long you forgot it had weight. The Brightleaf deal closed 2 weeks later, 5 my business account on a gray Thursday afternoon. And I sat and looked at they for a long time, and I sat and looked at the number for a long brother, and then I texted my brother. It's done, the deal closed. He wrote back, how do you feel? I typed, rich and tired. Mostly tired. He sent back, you earned every dollar of it, Cam. He flew down to Asheville the next month. We had dinner at a little place near my house, and afterward, standing on my porch in the cold, I handed him an envelope. Inside was a check for $19,400. This is the money they stole, using your name, I said. I'm giving it to you, not because you need it, because that money never should have been about money in the first place. He tried to give it back. I told him it wasn't a gift, it was a closing. They'd used his name to take something from me. I was using his name to end it. He stood on my porch and he cried, and then he hugged me, a real one, not the careful distance we'd grown up with. I'm sorry, I didn't come looking for you years ago, he said into my shoulder. You found me now, as I said. That's enough. A card came in the mail just before Christmas. His handwriting. It said he was proud of who I'd become and proud to be my brother, and that he was glad we got a second chapter. I taped it to my refrigerator. It's still the only thing on there. There was no card from my parents, no call, no text, just silence. The same silence they'd wrapped me in 7 years earlier. Except now I was the one standing in it on purpose, and it didn't feel like being erased. It felt like a door I'd finally closed from my own side. I sat in my own kitchen on a rainy Asheville night, 30 years old, running a company worth millions, with a brother who actually saw me, and I thought about a man raising a glass in a back room and telling a crowd that someday I'd figure something out. He was right, in a way he'd never understand. I did figure something out. It took me 7 years and everything I had. I figured out that I was never the backup. I just grew up in a house that couldn't tell the difference between the two. And the day I stopped waiting for them to learn was the day my whole life finally started.